Okay, we're moving on to the May-June 2018 paper. Instructions. Each sentence in this section has either one or two words missing. Choose from the four options the word or pair of words which best completes the meaning of the sentence. Mark your choice on the answer sheet. You might realize that these are actually 5 repeat questions. Due to this, I want you to pause the video here and submit your answers for all 5. So pause the video, answer all 5 questions, then I'll quickly give you the answers and move on. Alright, since these questions and answers would have been previously explained, I'll just give you the answers quickly and you can make a note of whether your answers were correct or not. If you get any of these answers incorrect, then you'll have to go back to where I explained these answers. These questions appeared at the beginning of the May-June 2017 and also the May-June 2016 papers. Alright, for 6 through 10, choose the word or phrase that is most nearly opposite in meaning to the underlined word or words. Mark your choice on the answer sheet. So we're looking for opposites here. Number 6, he was eager to share the news with his friends. The opposite of eager is reluctant. If you're eager to do something, then you're very excited to do it. You just can't wait to get it done. If you're reluctant, it means you're unwilling. You're trying to avoid doing it. You're trying to put it off. Number 7. My parents and even some teenagers do not approve of the amount of permissiveness in today's society. Only possible answer here, restrictiveness. Permissiveness, if you look at this word, you'll be able to see the word permission. So if you have permission to do almost anything, then that is permissiveness. So if you're restricted from doing things, that would be the opposite of being permitted to do things. So permissiveness, opposite, restrictiveness. Number 8. Every effort was made to avert the chance of failure. To avert means to avoid or escape. To ensure means to make sure that something happens. So your answer must be A. 9. The president of the Students' Association never mentioned the treasurer's integrity. A person who has integrity is a person who you can trust, a person you can depend on, a person who has strong values. So the opposite of that would be a dishonest person. Number 10. She seems to be sensitive to the feelings of others. If you're sensitive to the feelings of others, it means you're aware of how others feel, you're able to detect, you're able to tell what persons around you are feeling. The opposite of that would be being unaware, so A. Alright, items 11 to 15. Revise each of the following sentences according to the directions that follow it. Do not change the meaning of the original sentence. Look at options A to D for the word or phrase that best suits your revised sentence and mark your choice on the answer sheet. 11. People from crowded nations cannot get over the accessibility of Canada's natural environment in all its magnificence. Begin the sentence with, it is impossible for. And the only way to begin the sentence with impossible for is to follow up with to get over. And the new sentence will be, it is impossible for people from crowded nations to get over the accessibility of Canada's natural environment in all its magnificence. You simply cannot begin the sentence with to be over for, to have got over, or to getting over. 12. If Charlie invites me, I will go to his party. And if you begin the sentence with word Charlie to invite me, then you must follow it up with I would go. Simple grammar here. 13. More is experienced in one day of the life of a learned man than an ignorant man experiences in his whole lifetime. A learned man experiences more in a day than an ignorant man experiences in his whole lifetime. So C. 14. She found, even after she made several attempts to regulate the sprinkler, that the water was still reaching the furniture on the veranda. New sentence. Having made several attempts to regulate the sprinkler, she found that. 15. The cricket match ended abruptly when many of the spectators stormed the field. Begin with, many of the spectators stormed. So, many of the spectators stormed the field, so the cricket match ended abruptly. By now we should be used to questions like these. We'll simply be selecting where the errors are. If you need to, pause the video and read the instructions carefully. Number 16. Considering the chaos you would cause if you were to resign now, I would have no choice than to refuse your request. Okay, this one is a little tricky, but C is incorrect. I have no choice but to refuse your request. Or you could have said, I have no other choice than to. But because there is no other here, we need but instead of than. 17. You may notice that the windows of the house next to the playground looks like those of ancient English cottages. CSEC likes to give us these tricky subject-verb agreement sentences. You may notice that the windows look. This is not the subject. The subject is the windows of the house. So the windows look. B should be look. 18. There is hardly a point to our knocking as no one is not home. Okay, if a double negative with no one and not, it should be no one is home. 19. Tom, the most talented of those musicians who need help, has promised to give his services free of charge for any worthwhile cause. No error here. I guess CSEC is trying to trick us with this. Tom, the most talented of those musicians who need help. Need is correct, because the need here is related to those musicians who need help. It is the musicians who need help here, and not Tom specifically. Tom is just one of these musicians who need help. 20. Any disease of the bones and joints which are due to deficiencies in a single nutritional factor can be prevented. Another easy one, any disease that's singular, this should be is. Okay, we should be used to these questions by now. We'll choose A for redundancy, B for cliche or misused metaphors, C for incorrect grammar or diction, D for a perfect sentence. Of course, pause and reread the instructions if you need to. Let's go on to 21. There are many who have not considered the need to abstain from alcohol, but sobriety is truly the only option for one who wishes to engage in healthy lifestyle practices. This is a perfectly good sentence. Perhaps they're trying to trick us with have. But yeah, this cannot be has. This should be have because this is plural. Many have. And nothing else seems off about this sentence. 22. He wanted to beg for his old job, but that ship has sailed, and he had to simply play the hand that was dealt him. Alright, so for 22, I think this is actually a very tricky one. I think this is a bad question from CSEC because we can see B and C here. I think there are cliches here with that ship has sailed and playing the hand that was dealt him. However, as I said earlier, if there is incorrect grammar, this takes precedence. This is the one you have to go with. So if you think there are two errors and one of those errors is incorrect grammar or diction, then your answer has to be the incorrect grammar or diction because that supersedes all of the errors. Where is the problem? Has should be had. He wanted to beg for his old job, but that ship had sailed. We should be going into the past participle tense here. That ship had sailed. So he had to simply play the hand that was dealt him. And by the way, even though you could consider these to be cliches, they're actually not misused. So that's another argument for C. 23. Rising from the throne, the crowd cheered their noble monarch as he walked solemnly forward to greet the foreign dignitaries. Very easy A. We see lots of redundancies. Noble monarch, that's a redundancy. A monarch has to be noble, so just monarch would have been fine. And some persons might say that foreign dignitaries is redundant, but it's not quite redundant because dignitaries don't necessarily have to be foreigners. But we already have enough redundancies, so A. 24. The moon shone brightly in the clear night sky, its cool light a blessing after the searing heat of day. Excellent sentence. D. 25. The clerk raised his voice in protest. His boss asked him to hold his tongue since empty vessels made the most noise and are often thrown in the den to be eaten by the lions. Right, here we have a cliche, empty vessels made the most noise, and here this has to be a misused metaphor, so B. Alright, next section, items 26 through 33. If your memory serves you correctly, then you will recognize that we have already done this poem on the 2016 paper. That means we're going to be blazing through these questions because we have a lot of repeat questions as well. But we do have a few new questions, so I'll explain the answers for those. But I will not be explaining the answers for the questions we've already gone through. If you need something to be re-explained, just go back to the 2016 paper for those explanations. Also, I won't be reading the poem again, so just pause here, read the poem, then we'll get into the questions. Alright, 26 is a repeat question, so submit your answer for 26. Regarding looks, personification. If you need the explanation, go back to the 2016 paper. 27. The garden seemed crisscrossed in line 2 because the repeat question A. 28. Which of the following phrases is meant to be taken literally? Repeat question A. 29. Her garden stands neatly around her house. Line 5 tells us that. C. Repeat question. 30. The poet uses the words frail consciousness in line 14 to show that Mama. Repeat question B. 31. Which of the following best describes the woman's extra thoughtfulness of her mother? Repeat question C. 32. The poet uses the phrase borrowed children in line 17 to show. Repeat question B. 33. Which of the following were done by the children to show their love for the woman? Repeat question C. And just like that, we're done with an even shape. Alright, we have a brand new passage, so I'll read this. Afterward, pause the video and read it for yourself. Then we'll get into the questions. Here, we'll be dealing with items 34 through 41. The view from the terrace. Marcus wheeled himself out of his accustomed place at the table on the terrace, and the sight struck him immediately. How could it not? It was an abomination, a desecration, a heresy, a sight unbelievable. There was a house on the hillside, his hill, the one which overlooked the village and which his terrace faced. It was a small house, to be sure. He estimated it to be no more than 25 feet by 12, with one door and one window on the long side which faced him. From the distance, it was no more than a doll's house, or what a child might draw. A wooden hut similar to those which sprung up daily in the squatter settlements, which everywhere littered the hillsides, ringing the city, visible evidence of society out of control. But his hillside wasn't a squatter settlement, and no other house marred his view. His house sat on a slight rise above the village in the valley, and from there he had an uninterrupted view of the mountains on all sides. Far away there were houses, proper ones, that is, but none close enough to mar his vision. It had never occurred to him that the hillside he gazed at every day would ever be defaced with human habitation. It was so steep and inhospitable. Few trees grew on it except for the occasional clump of mangoes. It was mostly covered with grass, which burned every year in the dry months, and agaves which from time to time flowered yellow. Halfway up the hill, and directly in front of his favorite seat on the terrace, was the only tree of any size, and this was a silk cotton tree, which would one day become a giant, but which was still small as cotton trees go. Year after year he watched its progress, as it shed its leaves in the winter months, and turned a bright green in the spring. And now, immediately behind this tree, as if sheltering in its arms, someone had built a house. On his hill. It wasn't really his hill, but who else was there to claim it? Who else had gazed at it 365 mornings every year for the past 12 years? Alright, let's move to 34. Which word best describes the homeowner's attitude to the hillside near his house? Okay, we see that he's very possessive of the hillside. He thinks that he owns the hillside. We see many repetitions of his hillside throughout the passage. And we see that even though it wasn't actually his hillside, who else was there to claim it? So he had laid claim on the hillside. We also see how horrified he is to see a house springing up and blocking his view. So he's possessive of the hillside. 35. The words struck him in line 2 suggest that to the homeowner, the sudden appearance of the squatter's house Remember, we're focusing on struck him. What does it mean when something strikes you? When you look out and something that you see strikes you. That's not necessarily disgust coming in. And of course, it's not interest coming in how quickly the house was built. He wasn't interested in how quickly it was built. So perhaps it aroused shock at the unexpected neighbor. He was surprised, very, very surprised to see a neighbor out there all of a sudden. We could say that it stimulated pain because of the loss of privacy and control. We know this man wanted basically to control the hill and have his private space, but struck him particularly more connotes shock. If something strikes you, it means you're shocked by it. 36. The phrase sat on, line 9, tells us that the house is comfortably situated. When you're personifying something to say that it sits on something, then it's well poised, well comfortably situated. Look at the sentence. His house sat on a slight rise above the village in the valley, and from there he had an uninterrupted view of the mountains on the hillside. So we can see that this house was in a pretty good position. It was comfortably situated. It wasn't necessarily set into the hillside, and it certainly wasn't precariously located, because saying that something sits on, it doesn't give the image that it is precariously located. And D just doesn't make sense. 37. Which of the following did the homeowner believe gave him the right to claim the hill? You see at the end of the extract, C, the length of time he lived there. It wasn't really his hill, but who else was there to claim it? Who else had gazed at it 365 mornings every year for the past 12 years? So he had been there for 12 years. So basically, because of that, he believed that it was his hill. These are all kind of true, but none of them really gave the homeowner the right or the supposed right to claim the hill. 38. The word littered in line 7 highlights the owner's belief that the squatters' settlements were Alright, this one I think is a bit tricky. We know that when somewhere is littered, it is dirtied. We know that rubbish or garbage is usually what is littering the place, so we know that it's a blemish, and we know that he sees the squatter settlements as a negative thing. You know, society out of control. They're like garbage in society, just littering the place. And of course, poorly built. They were littered. He didn't mind the proper houses, but the squatter settlements, those were like rubbish in his sight. He didn't enjoy seeing those. But temporary, I really oscillated between C and D, but I don't think that littered really highlights the temporary nature of the squatter settlements. I mean, litter, rubbish, garbage can be in a place for a very long time. You can say that the hill is littered with something, and that something might always be there. So not temporary, so we'll be working with C, 2 and 3 only. 39. Which of the following best captures the homeowner's biggest fear? So we can eliminate all of these because these actually make no sense at all. He did not fear anything about the cotton tree, and he didn't fear that proper houses would be built on the hillside. In fact, he doesn't really mind proper houses. He just doesn't like the squatter settlement houses. And of course, the littering mentioned in line 7 doesn't refer to literal littering in terms of the garbage. So the only possible answer is C. The hillside will become a squatter's settlement. He sees one squatter house pop up, and he's afraid that eventually more will pop up and it will turn into a squatter settlement. Of course, he sees squatter settlements as evidence that society is out of control. So he doesn't like the squatter settlements at all. And he says here, but his hillside wasn't a squatter settlement. So he really wants to keep it that way. 40. The repetition of his hill in lines 3 and 20 by the narrator. Of course, it emphasizes the passion behind his attitude. He's very passionate about owning the hill. He's passionate about protecting the hill of sorts. And we can eliminate A quite easily. It doesn't show any disgust, repetition of his, and it doesn't show how persistent his shock was because he isn't shocked in the second paragraph. C is a contender, presents the homeowner's stubbornness. He's, I guess, too stubborn to allow persons to move onto the hill and to share the hill, but it more than anything else emphasizes the passion behind his attitude. 41. Which words best sum up the homeowner's view of squatters' settlement? Easily, society out of control. He sees the settlements as evidence of society being out of control. Sprung up legally makes no sense here. Marred his view is not his view of the settlements, and this doesn't make any sense. So by elimination, we're left with B. And that's it for this passage. Let's move on. The oceans. To the prejudiced eyes of land-bound humans, the oceans seem like one continuous mass, as homogeneous as outer space. To some extent they are, and some marine creatures treat the whole maritime world as their oyster. Some of the great whales, for instance, lunge from the surface to the depths as a matter of course, and divide their feeding and breeding between the poles and the tropics. Equally striking to the marine scientists, however, is the variousness of the oceans. Each sea embraces several or indeed many distinct environments, each of which occupies a discrete zone. Some of these zones also vary markedly with time, through the day, with the tides, and therefore with the phases of the moon, by season, and sometimes in cycles of several years. And superimposed on all these variations in space and time are the more erratic influences of currents and of the influx of rivers. In short, patchiness in space and time is as much a feature of the oceans as it is of land. Indeed, patchiness is a great principle in ecology, though it is rarely singled out as such. Each oceanic zone has its characteristic creatures, sometimes a huge variety of different types, and sometimes only a few, but many creatures of all kinds spend part of their lives in one kind of environment and part in another. And because there are so many different ways of making a living in the oceans, so many permutations of habitats, there is a correspondingly huge variety of creatures. And so many creatures take quite different forms and live in quite different ways at different stages of their lives. There are far fewer species in the oceans than on land, however, because there are no marine equivalents of the forest trees, and it is the trees that provide such a myriad of habitats for land-based creatures. Pause here and read this a couple of times. We'll be looking at items 42 through 49 on the basis of what is stated or implied in this passage. 42. The writer's main purpose in the extract is to A. Show that the ocean is very diverse. He says that even though the oceans seem as just one big unvaried thing, it's actually very diverse, very varied. Equally striking to marine scientists is the variousness of the oceans. And we see that each sea embraces several or even many distinct environments. And we see the variations in terms of timing here. Day to day, with each tide, phases of the moon, we see how varied the ocean is and how it changes with times and seasons. It goes on to talk about the patchiness of the ocean, in that it is kind of divided into many different patches or zones, many distinct areas. So yeah, the entire extract is really showing us how diverse the ocean is. And actually, we can quickly eliminate B and C, and the entire extract isn't about the different creatures. This is just an example to support A. 43. The word prejudiced in line 1 is nearest in meaning to That's a giveaway. B, to be prejudiced means to be biased, to not have an objective or a fair viewpoint. 44. The writer says that prejudiced eyes see the oceans as being as homogeneous as outer space. Lines 1 and 2. This description suggests that the ocean seems to be D, one continuous stretch of water. We know that outer space is homogeneous and endless. It's just one thing going on and on, never ending, one infinite stretch. And that is how the ocean seems to be. And homogeneous simply means continuous. There is just a kind of unity, just one thing instead of a varied thing. And continuous mass also suggests that it's just one thing continuing with no variation. 45. The statement, some marine creatures treat the whole maritime world as their oyster, in lines 2 to 3, suggests that the creatures D, move freely throughout the oceans. If someone says that the world is their oyster, it means that they can go anywhere, do anything. It's their little playground. So some marine creatures treat the whole maritime world, the whole oceanic world, as their little playground because they're able to just go everywhere. And it has nothing to do with literal oysters, so A and B are out. And C is the opposite of what this means. 46. According to the extract, patchiness in line 13 refers to giveaway here, variation. Patchiness. So the ocean has many different patches, many different varied zones. And nothing else here makes any sense whatsoever. 47. Which of the following best describes the type of writing in the extract? Informative. The extract is simply presenting information and making us more aware of how varied the oceans are. It's not criticizing anything, it's not telling us a story, and it's not really arguing to prove a point. It's simply telling us facts, presenting information in a fairly objective way. 48. According to the extract, which of the following statements is false? Alright, let's look at each one. There are more species on land than in the ocean. Let's check the extract. Here we have, there are far fewer species in the oceans than on land. Fewer species in the oceans than on land, which means more on land than on ocean, so that's not false. Obviously, B is the answer. Let's check C and D. Many ocean creatures divide their time in different parts of the ocean. We see here that many creatures of all kinds spend part of their lives in one kind of environment and part in another. So that's not false, it's true. Many sea creatures take different forms at different stages of their lives. We have that here. So only B is false. Last one for this extract. The clause, there are so many different ways of making a living in the oceans, in line 16, refers to what? Okay, the answer has to be D, and it is actually explained directly after this line. There are so many different ways of making a living in the oceans, so many permutations of habitats. There is correspondingly huge variety of creatures. So the many different ways of making a living, we're talking about the many different creatures and basically how they live in the oceans. So it has nothing to do with humans. That's it for oceans. Okay, now we're moving down to items 50 through 54. The tours we offer are truly unique and very much off the beaten track. We take you into the country to experience the historical, cultural, and breathtaking scenic highlights of the island. Our rich heritage in farming over the centuries has produced grand plantation mansions surrounded by picturesque little copses with stately royal palms swaying majestically in the easterly trade winds. The neat sugarcane fields sweep down the rolling hills toward the wild east coast, where miles of untouched beaches are graced with the backdrop of rugged cliffs and the giant breakers of the Atlantic crashing ashore. At Highlight Outdoor Tours, the choice is yours, whether you're the adventurous type or prefer a more laid-back tour. Just give us a call and let us advise you. Okay. Number 50. The advertisement was most likely taken from a this is obviously taken from a tourism brochure. You see here that this is just advertising a location, a particular tour. We see that the Highlight Outdoor Tours is really advertising themselves as a place where tourists can come and enjoy some wonderful aspects of the island. 51. Which of the following is the nearest in meaning to off the beaten track in line 1? D. Along routes not regularly traversed. The beaten track is the track or the routes that everyone usually takes. So off the beaten track means they're going to be taking you on some more exotic, some strange routes, some untaken roads, some places that are basically out of the way that most people wouldn't get the chance to experience. And these can all, ABC can all be eliminated easily. Off the beaten track has nothing to do with whether the roads or trails are paved or not. And by definition, trails are unpaved, so this doesn't even make sense. Into the wilderness, that's not what they're talking about. And it's definitely not dense vegetation. 52. Which of the following does the advertisement promise? Alright, the answer here is D. Scenic beauty, sedate enjoyment. Sedate meaning, in a sense, the opposite of scenic here. Scenic we know is beautiful, picturesque. Sedate is more low-key, nothing over the top. And we have outdoor adventure. Let's see if we find all three. We see scenic enjoyment here. These lines talk about outdoor adventure. And the name of the tours is Highlight Outdoor Tours. And we see the sedate enjoyment because whether you're the adventurous type or you prefer a more laid back tour, just give us a call so you can get something a bit more laid back. 53. The phrase, the neat sugarcane fields sweep down the rolling hills in line 5 is an example of Alright, this is a metaphor. The sugarcane fields aren't literally sweeping down the hills and the hills aren't literally rolling. This is metaphoric language that is really describing how bountiful the sugarcane fields are and kind of establishing the relationship between the sugarcane fields and the hills. There's no contrast or repetition here and specific reference to what? 54. The advertisement seeks to persuade the reader mainly through the use of So we can easily eliminate C and D, but then we have A and B, and this is quite a close call, but we see in this passage quite a lot of imagery. There is some detail, but there's a lot of imagery. We see here breathtaking scenic highlights. We see here surrounded by picturesque little copses, stately royal palms swaying majestically in the easterly trade winds. Neat sugarcane fields sweep down the rolling hills. Untouched beaches graced with a backdrop of rugged cliffs, giant breakers crashing ashore. So this is all imagery. They are really painting the picture. They're allowing us to see exactly what they have to offer. And they use some detail in painting the imagery, but imagery is the main persuasive device. Alright, for the last section, I'll just allow you guys to pause here and read this, and then I'll jump into the questions. Alright, here we are, number 55. What does the airline promise if a person joins the miles program? They promise rewards for every flight. Specifically, you'll be earning miles every flight. If you double check the passage, they do not offer free faster travel, free shopping, or frequent shopping. These are not promised. 56. How many bonus miles does a silver tier member receive? Okay, clearly 3,000. No contest here. Silver tier member, unique member credentials, 3,000 miles bonus upon attaining the silver tier status. So gold members get 5,000, silver members get 3,000. 57. To which of the following destinations can a person fly using 25,500 airline miles? If we check over here, you need 25,500 miles to travel between the Caribbean / South America and North America. Here we have North America. 58. According to the advertisement, what should a prospective member do if more detailed information is needed about the benefits of the program? Of course, visit their webpage, which we see at the bottom here. Flying frequently will not get you more information, and they didn't say anything about visiting the offices, and joining the miles program will not get you more information. 59. What technique does the advertisement use to appeal to travelers to join the miles program? And they're using facts. We see that if we fly 20,000 miles, we can become a silver member. If we fly 40,000 miles, we can become a gold member. If we fly 80,000 miles, we can qualify to become an executive gold member. These are facts. We see here some perks of the silver membership, all facts. Same thing here. And we see this table of facts showing us where we can go with certain numbers of miles. All facts. No opinions here, and there's really no persuasive language going on, and certainly no personal experience. Final question on the paper. The main purpose of the advertisement is to encourage persons to obviously, this is all about becoming members of the miles program. They want you to join their program. They do want you to enjoy air travel, but they want you to enjoy air travel through their program so they can make money, of course. It says here at the very top, join our Caribbean Miles program. And that's what this entire ad is getting you to do. You can get all these things when you join. You can become a silver tier or gold tier member, and you can get all these nice things. You can go to these places when you get these numbers of miles. These are all encouraging us to join the miles program. And that's it for the May 2018 paper.